The paper being discussed is an egg-adult association, gender, and reproduction in pterosaurs. So throughout this presentation, I'll just explain to you the analysis and all the results that came out to their final conclusion. Pterosaurs were flying reptiles of the order Pterosauria. They lived from the late Triassic, 210 million years ago, to the end of the Cretaceous, 66 million years ago. Pterosaurs are the earliest vertebrates to have powered flight. Darwinopterus is a specific genus of pterosaur being discussed in this paper. They are named after biologist Charles Darwin. Darwinopterus were around 3 feet in length, with a very long tail. They flew the skies of Asia, specifically China. Until about recently, there was a lack of fossil evidence making their reproductive biology unknown. But because they were aerial organisms, it was inferred that their reproduction and early stages of growth were similar to that of birds. This means that they were incubated in open nests and hatched undeveloped young, requiring care and feeding by the parent, unlike reptiles who are precocial and do not need this. The question being tested in this paper was, in early stages of growth, were pterosaurs altricial, similar to birds, or precocial, like that of a reptile? So just to define altricial and precocial, altricial meaning that at a very young age, organisms require extreme parental care and feeding from the parent. On the other hand, precocial meaning that the young needed almost little to no type of parental influence, and so we're trying to discover whether or not the pterosaur was like that of a bird or a reptile. Now, preceding this paper, it was assumed that they were like that of birds. After this paper, you might see some different results. Just to explain the picture before I elaborate on it in a second, to the left it has a fragmented arm. This just implies that it broke its arm sometime during its life. And towards the bottom where the double arrows are pointing to, there's this imprint, that little circle, and this is the impression of the shell membrane, and it implies that the egg was close to oviposition or close to being laid. So the pterosaur was close to laying her egg. Just recently, specifically in 2010, a female fossil belonging to the genus Darwinopterus, as previously mentioned, was found in the Tiaozhijiang formation of Liaoning province, China. Upon further investigation, it was suspected that the organism experienced a collision with something in the air, resulting in a broken forearm, as you can see in the picture to the right. The Darwinopterus was unable to sustain flight, crashed into the ocean, and then drowned. The female was carrying an egg in her posterior pelvis, as you can see from the image. Because there was an impression of the shell membrane in the fossil, it implied that the egg was close to oviposition, or close to being laid. This allowed researchers to estimate the initial egg mass, or in short, IEM, and the number that they came out with for the initial egg mass was estimated at around 6.1 grams. The IEM, or initial egg mass, of the egg is relatively small when compared to the adult female mass, or FM. Extant birds of similar mass to that of a female Darwinopterus fossil produce eggs around 10.3 grams, rather than the fossil egg, which produced around 6.1 grams. Bird eggs weigh more because they contain resources needed for development after oviposition during incubation from the parent, unlike reptiles, whose eggs weigh considerably less because they are buried and left there by their parents to receive nutrients from water uptake. So because the Pterosaurus eggs are considerably lighter than that of extant birds, it almost implies that they were more closely related to reptiles when it comes to reproductive biology. And the picture to our right is just a zoomed in frame of the previous picture from the preceding slide. And basically where it's labeled IE, that is just the shell membrane imprint that I was speaking about earlier. So this graph right here displays the compared initial egg mass to adult female mass, aka IEM to FM ratios, for extant reptiles, crocodiles and turtles, birds, and pterosaurs. So the relation of the initial egg mass to female adult mass provides direct evidence of reproductive effort and displays that birds make a significantly greater investment in their young compared to reptiles. And as you can see, the ratio of the Darwinopterus is more closely related to that of a reptile compared to that of a bird. Analysis of initial egg mass to female mass ratios displays that Darwinopterus had reptile-like eggs rather than bird-like eggs. This suggests/implies that pterosaurs practice burial of their eggs and receive nutrients through water uptake, with no help from their parents, unlike incubation, which is complete help from a parent. This evidence for low parental investment contradicts the widespread assumption that reproductive biology in pterosaurs was that of like birds, when in actuality it was more closely related to that of extinct and extant reptiles. So just some concluding thoughts, and then I'll end it off with a summary. So the small investment of resources by pterosaurs in their eggs and the absence of any need to care for their eggs or young may have proved highly advantageous to their aerial lifestyle and strong selection pressures for mass reproduction and energy conservation. So just to summarize what happened in this paper, basically, through evidence and a lot of research, we discovered that a pterosaur is actually precocial, like that of a reptile, rather than a bird who needs a lot of influence from their mothers and they need to be raised basically every step of the way. When a pterosaur and other reptiles can just be buried into the ground and they receive their nutrients through water uptake, so they don't need help from their parents. So this kind of just overturns a widespread belief that pterosaurs were actually bird-like, when in actuality, when it came to early stages, they were more precocial. Thank you for listening.